Good day, everyone. We are going to tackle about the principles underlying teaching. I want to share this saying by Laris Malaguzzi. Learning and teaching should not stand on opposite banks and just watch the river flow by. Instead, they should embark together on a journey down the water. Through an active, reciprocal exchange, teaching can strengthen learning how to learn.
There are five theories of learning. The first one is behavioral perspective. So, first is the behavioral perspective. So, behaviorism or the behavioral learning theory is a popular concept that focuses on how students learn in school. Behaviorism focuses on the idea that all behaviors are learned through interaction with the environment, and it has a big impact to the students. This learning theory states that behaviors are learned from the environment and say that it is innate or inherited factors have very little influence behavior. So pa- positive reinforcement is the key in the behavioral learning theory. Without it, students will quickly abandon their responses because they don't appear it to be working. So for example, if students are supposed to get a sticker every time they get an A on a test, and then teachers stop giving that positive reinforcement, so students are less may get A's on their tests because the behavior is not connected to a reward for them. So the second one is cognitive learning theory. So cognitive learning theory is a broad theory used to explain the mental processes and how they are influenced by both internal and external factors in order to produce learning in an individual. The theory is credited to educational psychologist Jean Piaget. He believed knowledge is something that is actively constructed by learners based on their existing cognitive structure. And also, cognitive learning theory is about understanding how the human minds work while people learn. The theory focuses on how information is processed by the brain and how learning occurs through that internal processing of information. So it's based on the idea that people mentally process the information they receive rather than simplify responding to stimuli from their environment. So Jean Piaget disagreed with the behavioral or behaviorist theory, which focuses strictly on observable behavior. He concentrated more attention to what went on inside the learner's head instead on how they react. In addition, the cognitive learning process is centered on the mental processes by which the learner takes in, interprets, stores, and retrieves information. These mental processes occur between stimulus, input, and response or output. The individual takes in the stimulus, processes it in their mind, and then acts upon the stimulus. Those mental processes have several elements, including attention, observing, perception, interpreting, organizing, memory, categorizing, and forming generalization. So the next one is developmental perspective. So this perspective is a neo-Piagetian theories of cognitive development are anchored on developmental psychology, which operates on a number of important assumptions related to education. So human cognitive competence is viewed from the psychology of cognitive development, and it assumes that education aims to help in the learner's acquisition of knowledge and skills that is compatible with their understanding and problem-solving capabilities at different age levels. Also, it is imperative that teaching follows a developmental sequence by providing information on a knowledge that the learners can assimilate according to their age and grade level. So the second is psychology of cognitive developments involves to the basic knowledge of how cognitive change takes place along with the recognition of the factors that give weight to cognitive competence. In education, it's reflected in the knowledge of construction, which is an offshoot of effective instruction. So lastly, psychology of cognitive developments is concerned to itself with individual differences, taking into other account the cognitive processes in abilities, rates, and prospect of change, as well as the mechanism of change. So individuals different in the cognitive development, whether in self-understanding and self-regulation, in levels of understanding, system of processing, and in scientific, mathematical, and verbal abilities. So this principle of involving intra and inter-individual difference have been proven to be educational useful in that the teachers are able to cater the needs of different learners according to their difference or capabilities rather and interests. The next one is social cognitive perspective. So social cognitive theory is a blended of behavioral, cognitive, and social elements initially founded by Albert Bandura. So according to Bandura, in the observational learning process, a learner's behavior changes as a result of observing others' behavior and its corresponding consequences. So the theory identifies several factors affecting behavioral or cognitive change while observing a model. Albert Bandura also disagreed with Skinner's strict behaviorist approach to learning and development because he felt that thinking and reasoning are important components of learning than just observe. And he represented a social cognitive theory that emphasized that the environment and cognitive factors influence behavior. In social cognitive theory, the concept of reciprocal determinism, observational learning, and self-efficacy all play a part in learning and development. So, the last theory is constructivist or constructive perspective. So, this theory emphasizes the knowledge and experience of the learner that include the social and cultural determinants of the learning process. So, it included motivation. So, motivation external, internal rather, that internal state that enhances, prolongs, and guides behavior that impacts students' learning and behavior towards a subject matter. Also, motivational theories also explain how learning is effective through learners' goals toward academic tasks. Learners with performance goals achieve higher grades, improve their abilities, and arrive at positive outcome. And there are other theory. It's attribution theory developed by Weiner 1986. According to this theory, uh, the learner may bring to a particular task depending on his interests and intrinsic motivation, personal goal, and his belief in the causes of either success or failure. A learner may attribute failure to lack of ability and consequently may give up and lose interest and may not perform well. On the contrary, when failure is seen due to lack of effort, the feeling of guilt comes in, and they realize they can prompt to increase effort, work harder, and improve performance. And that's all. Next, thank you.
Principles of teaching according to various authors. According to Fleming 1996, teaching is a science as it involves a systematic process of instruction guided by established theories, principles, approaches, strategies, methods, techniques, and activities to make teaching effective. On the individual, teaching is a science also in that teachers are constantly collecting data by observing their students in order to see if learning is taking place and how they learn best. And like scientists, teachers experiment with new techniques or strategies to see how they work. Leigh Vygotsky's socio-cultural learning describes how positive interactions are with more capable peers and use of cognitive mental constructs. According to Vygotsky, much important learning by the child occurs through social interaction with a skillful tutor. The tutor may model behaviors and or provide verbal instructions for the child. The child seeks to understand the actions or instructions provided by the tutor, often the parent or teacher, then internalizes the information, using it to guide or regulate their own performance. Vygotsky argued that we learn best in a social environment where we construct meaning through interaction with others. Jerome Bruner elaborated on Vygotsky's theory to arrive at the concept of instructional scaffolding, where learning draws support from school or information environment. Psychologist and instructional designer Jerome Bruner first used the term scaffolding in this context back in 1960s. Bruner was influenced by the work of Leigh Vygotsky, who shared Bruner's belief that a child's social environment and social interactions are key elements of the learning process. A scaffold ensures that children aren't left to their own devices to understand something. The support or scaffold is removed when the student is ready. Example: if the student is learning a new concept in an algebra class, he or she might observe it being done step by step by a more advanced peer in a group or by a teacher. This support is the scaffold he needs temporarily. Each step is demonstrated and explained, and then the student tries it on his or her own without scaffold. Bernard Weiner, 1986, the one who developed the attribution theory, points to the volition that a learner may bring to a particular task depending on his interest and intrinsic motivation, personal goal, and his belief in the causes of either success or failure. Example: a student who blames his lack of effort to failure in examination may be motivated to study harder for the next exam in order to avoid the same outcome. However, a student who blames herself or himself, incapable of studying, lack of motivation, and is more likely to fail in the next examination too, solely because of her lack of effort. James L. Morsell's 6 Principles of Teaching. Number 1. Principal context. Educational management has been considered as one interesting subject, particularly by the educators, who are aware of the need of knowledge management. But when one talks about knowledge management, it becomes necessary to analyze the meaning of the word knowledge in different perspectives. Fleming, 1996, pointed to a number of observations related to context development. He stresses the following: a collection of data is not information. A collection of information is not knowledge. A collection of knowledge is not wisdom. A collection of wisdom is not truth. The idea is that information, knowledge, wisdom, and truth are more than simply collections. Rather, the whole represents more than the sum of its parts and has a synergy of its own. When we say collection of data or data collection, it is the systematic approach to gathering and measuring information from a variety of sources to get a complete and accurate picture of an area of interest. A collection of data is not information because data is a building block. It is raw. It has not been shaped, processed, or interpreted, while information gives meaning, context, or perspective, and can answer the question what, who, when, and where. A collection of information is not knowledge. When we say information, these are the facts provided or learned about something or someone, while knowledge it is the information and skills acquired through experience or education. A collection of knowledge is not wisdom. Knowledge is the accumulation of facts and data that you have learned about or experienced. It's being aware of something and having information. Knowledge is really about facts and ideas that we acquire through study, research, investigation, observation, or experience, while wisdom is the ability to discern and judge which aspects of the knowledge are true, right, lasting, and applicable to your life. A collection of wisdom is not truth. Wisdom is the ability to think and act using knowledge, experience, understanding, common sense, and insight, while truth is often used to mean being accord with fact or reality or fidelity to an original or standard.
A pleasant good morning to each and everyone. I'm Gerald B. De La Torre, and I am your reporter for today's discussion. For today's report, I would tackle about the principle of context. And when we say the principle of context, it is a learning principle of context that is the instructions can be effective if learning takes place through situations and circumstances that provide setting materials for the process of learning to go on. This principle of context is categorized into 6 levels as follows. And now, let's begin with the level 1. Context consists of the textbook only, and this includes the predominantly verbal, no problem-solving experience, lacks dynamic appeal, and limited verbal response to verbal stimuli. And this level 1, it is the instruction through the use of textbook. It is predominantly verbal. It's because it is limited to question from the text. This kind of learning situation, which is the context consists of the textbook only, is characterized by the absence of problem-solving experience for the learners, and is the instruction revolves around the interpretation or the analysis of the content of the subject matter assigned. Level 2. Context consists of textbook together with a collateral or supplemental material. And this includes the wider in context, more reading of expository, and advocates, more extensive reading. This level 2, it is where the instruction from the text is expanded to include supplementary materials for enrichment purposes. This is the discussion that is no longer confined lesson from the basic text, but broadened to include establishments of connections or relations from outside readings. These level provide opportunities for more extensive readings. Level 3. Context consists of non-academic and current which materials like magazines, articles, and newspapers clippings. And this includes the concrete, specific, actual, and immediate, reality versus theories, and leads to extensive discussion. In this level 3, the consists of the material in the form of non-academic and current discussion, which includes the magazine's articles and newspaper clippings. This provides a situation for extensive discussion. There is a likelihood of improvements on learning from increased knowledge of theories and their application to reality. As learning theorists, much of their knowledge of learning came from the setting that are unlike classrooms, and that is the world outside, where learners face up to concrete, specific, actual, and immediate situation. Level 4, context consists of multi-sensory aids, and this includes the effective when used as aid in learning, related to contemplative learning, and ineffective if learner is passive. This means that the context consists of the use of multi-sensory aids as an aid to effective instruction. Learners react to situation or learning activities that appeal to their senses, like tactile and kinesis, in which case the learner's process should include a structuring of the classroom environment to provide meaningful experiences. Level 5, context consists of demonstration and presentation by the experts, and this includes the concrete setting and the learning beyond classroom setting. This means that the context is applied through demonstration and presentation by the experts. For meaningful verbal learning, knowledge is substantiated by lessons from experts or authorities. From the efforts to set materials indicated in the above mentioned levels about the teaching, it can be assumed that effective instruction can be produced by a variety of combination and the characteristic and condition rather than by one unique combination. Level 6, field experience, personal, social, and community understanding, and this includes the concrete, abundant, dynamic, readily apprehended setting for learning, goes beyond verbalization and concrete and first-hand experience. This means that the context related to the use of field experience, which may be personal and social, even experiences in the community are considered. This is a setting that goes beyond verbalization but focuses on first-hand experiences. In the process, learners are able to reflect on experience and explore on possibilities about an structural and environmental apart from the classroom. Then after all, instruction can be tailored to the needs of individual learners, thus allowing teachers to minimize the mass classroom experience altogether. Thank you for listening, and that's the end of my report about the principle of context.
Principle of focus. Level 1. Focus established by page assignment in textbook. Example, uniform structure, learning without unity, memorization. Level 2. The focus established by announced topic together with page or chapter references. This is an assignment that given in advance, including chapters to read and full of concentration on the subject matter. Very likely a better understanding and can provide full of attention to the lesson and therefore minimize confusion. Example, insight and understanding. The ability to see and understand clearly the inner nature of things. 2. Varied learning pattern. Refer to the range of competing and contested theories that aim to account for differences in individuals of learning. Level 3. Focus established by broad concept to be comprehended or problem to be solved. This provides for a school setting where learners are confronted with broad concept to understand or problems to be solved. First, we have direct at the mental process of the learners. Second, more varied learning patterns. Level 4. Focus established on a concept or a problem to be solved, a skill to be acquired to carry an undertaking. This focus is on the development of concept and acquisition of a skill to be able to carry out undertaking. First, we have flexibility and acquisition of more facts and information.
Principle of socialization. Social process encompasses the ways of thinking, interaction, and problem solving. Classroom is a conventional setting in which rule-bounded interaction between learner and the teacher. Level 1. Social pattern characterized by submission. Interaction is limited to the learner and teacher. There is absence of opportunities to share with groups and no learner-initiated activities. Level 2. Social pattern characterized by contribution. This setting is more liberal. Learners enjoy a certain amount of freedom to engage in activities and work on their own, adopting positive attitude towards discipline. Level 3. Social pattern characterized by cooperation. This setting, teacher is the organizer. Independent seat work is put aside to give way to a group discussion which target for a best result. It produces positive team spirit and a positive reaction from the teacher in the form of recognition for learners' responses and achievements.
Principle of individualization. The effectiveness of instruction must progress in terms of the learner's own purpose, aptitudes, abilities, and experimental procedures. These are the following scales of application of the principle of individualization. First, we have individualization through different performance in uniform tasks. In this setting, the teacher sets the lesson format as a part of his classroom structuring and sees to it that while the same to all, many offers varied ways doing the task according to the learner's aptitude, interests, and capabilities. While the objective for particular lesson is aimed at skills development, very likely the skills developed or acquired may also vary resulting from the difference between the learner attitudes and interests. Individualization through homogeneous groupings. Learners vary in age, ability, and sex. Classrooms tend to lean toward homogeneity, except for some learners' variables like race or social class, which educators find not acceptable in the homogeneous grouping, are acknowledged by educators and are considered advantage for effective instruction. For example, children who are deemed and risk special needs are placed in one group, while the gifted and talented students are placed in another. Homogeneous grouping is used to help all the students in the classroom stay on the same page as their classmates. Individualization through individual instruction. This kind of instruction calls for a person-centered planning for learning tasks normally adapted to the level of capability of the learner. Example, focuses in the needs of the individual student. Individualization through large units with optimal related activity. This kind of instruction where large topics or big blocks are divided into smaller units, which could be completed with a specified time frame. Example, the members of the group are given topics to engage individual activities for as long as this is related to the learning task at hand and activity will contribute and accomplish assigned class activity. Individualization through individual undertaking stemming from and contributing to the undertaking of the group of learners. This instruction is done to ensure cooperative learning while the group works on a specific learning activity. The task is divided among the members so that each member has a particular activity to work on. Example are cooperative learning, group projects, group study, and others. Principle of sequence. Sequence through logical succession of blocks of content, lesson, and courses. Define the principle. What is it? Principle is a noun and accepted, professed rule of action or conduct a person of a good moral principle. What does it do? They oversee school staff and teacher, coordinate curriculum, and provide students with a safe and productive environment to learn. How does it apply? Usually, something adapted, enacted, often specific application principle. Define the principle within models. Where it is. Model is to create a profound influence on how a problem is attacked and how a solution is shaped. How does it differ? The term model is used to refer to an abstract representation or a projection possibility with underlying theory as the basis. Generate the principle. How do I do it? A rule, a law, or a guideline or a fact. How do I apply it? So, receive feedback. How did I do it? Listen to the feedback given. Be aware of your response. What did I accomplish? To improve, enhance, an individual group. Sequence through noting, learning, lesson, course together by introduction, previews, pretest, reviews. This is done by supplementing discussion, studies, analysis of a lesson by introductions, reviews related to the lesson. Sequence organized in terms of readiness. This effective instruction is achieved if the teacher is able to order or set the particular learning task according to the readiness of learners to understand or assimilate whatever material is to be given to them. Is this therefore important to a teacher to measure the level of readiness or preparedness? Example, a girl will prepared to go on her first camping trip. The quality or state of being ready. Sequence organized in terms of lines emerging meaning. This call for planning specific learning tasks that will depend on the ability of the learners to give meaning specific situation, deduce impressions from whatever is read to think of the possibilities as an end result doing the activity.
Principle of evaluation. Evaluation is a component of effective instruction. It is necessary to determine if the objective of the instruction have been carried out and the learners understand the lesson. This is also knowing the effectiveness of instruction. Diagnostic evaluation. Type of evaluation given at the beginning of the instruction or during instruction. It's aimed to identify the strengths and weaknesses of students regarding to the topic to be discussed. Purpose of diagnostic evaluation. Determine level of competence of students. Identify the students who have already knowledge about the lesson. Determine the causes of learning problems that cannot be revealed by formative assessment. Formulate plan for remedial action. Formative evaluation. It is done during instruction. It is a type of evaluation used to monitor the learning process of the students during or after instruction. Purpose of formative evaluation. Provide immediate feedback to both students and teacher with regards to the success and failure of learning. Identify the learning error that is need to correction. Provide information to the teacher to modify instruction to improve learning. Summative evaluation. Type of evaluation usually given at the end of the course or unit. Purpose of summative evaluation. Determine the extent of which an instructional objectives have been met. Clarify students' mastery for the intended learning outcome and use for assigning grades. Provide information for judging appropriateness of the instructional objectives. Determine effectiveness of instruction. John Dewey's Educational Philosophy and Principles of Teaching. Teaching is good when it's based on the psychology of learning. In this concept, the child is made the center of the educative process. Teaching is good when it's well planned, such as activities are more meaningful, more inclusive, and has relation patterns. You design activities the child can relate on one subject to another, like storytelling about plant's life. Storytelling is English subject, and plant's life is both biology and science. Teaching is good when the learner is made conscious of the goals or aims to be accomplished. For example, setting objectives at the beginning of the lesson. This gives the child idea on what she will going to do or behave after or during the lesson. Learning is good when it provides learning experiences or situations that will ensure understanding. It requires rich environment of instructional materials or devices. For the child to understand more about the lesson as the teacher provide them more source of learning. Teaching is good when there is provision to meet individual differences. Provides activities that showcase the child potential and learning, grouping them based on what their talent or likes. If they like singing, give singing activities that relate to the topic. Teaching is good when it's utilized the past experiences of learners. Learning is easier when it's taught to the pupils already know. Teaching is good when the learner is stimulated to think and to reason. Let child think, analyze, and synthesis, like making experiments and find answer to the questions. Teaching is good when it's governed by democratic principles. It must govern by love and understanding. Learners are free from emotional tension. Teaching is good when the methods used is supplemented by another method and instructional devices. Best learning takes place when a greater number of senses are stimulated and utilized in the process. Teaching is good when evaluation is made. Evaluation serves as a feedback of students' learning and teaching effectiveness. And lastly, teaching is good when drill and review is made.
Carnegie and Mellon, Principles of Teaching. Teaching is a multifaceted activity. It includes tasks and goals simultaneously. In more effective and efficient teaching methods, there are 7 set of principles that Carnegie Mellon cited. Commitment in time and effort to the overall realization of the goals can help in implementing these principles. The first principle is an effective teaching involves acquiring knowledge about the learners and using that knowledge to inform the course design and the classroom teaching. Learning happens when we connect new information to what we already know. When children have limited knowledge about the world, then they have a smaller capacity to learn more about. Although these characteristics cannot be adequately measured, gathering the most relevant information as early as possible in course planning and continuing to do so. First, inform course design. It is where the objectives, pacing, examples, and format are being presented. Then next is help explain students' difficulties. It is where you are able to identify the common misconceptions. And lastly is the instructional adaptation. It is where you will recognize if additional practices is needed. An effective teaching involves aligning the 3 major components of instruction, which is the learning objectives, assessments, and instructional activities. By these components of instruction, it saves time and leads to a better course. For the teaching to become more effective to the students' learning, it enhances when an instructor articulates a clear set of learning objectives in which it is expected that the knowledge and skills of students are being demonstrated. Next is the instructional activities, such as the discussion, reading, and many more. It serves as a support to the learning objectives by providing goal-oriented practices. Next is the assessment. These are the tests, papers, and set of problems and performances that provides the learner to demonstrate and practice the knowledge and skills articulated in the objectives. Next principle is an effective teaching involves articulating explicit expectations regarding the learning objective policies. It is when the learner across classroom and given disciplines expected variation. It is when the knowledge and skills that the learner is expected to demonstrate and gives the learner the target which they will able to aim for and enables to monitor their progress. Altogether, being explicit leads to a more productive learning environment for all learners.
Effective teaching involves prioritizing the knowledge and skills we choose to focus on. It is necessary to make decisions, sometimes difficult ones, about what to include in a course. This involves, first, recognizing and setting the parameters of the course, class size, learners' backgrounds and experiences, course position in the curriculum sequence, number of course units. Second, setting priorities for students' learning, and last is determining a set of objectives that can be accomplished at a given time. Effective teaching involves recognizing and overcoming blind spots. Learners, on the other hand, may not yet have sufficient background and experience to make these moves and can become confused, arrive at incorrect conclusion, or fail to develop important skills. Effective teaching involves adopting appropriate teaching rules to support our learning goals. Moreover, teachers may take on a variety of roles in teaching: synthesizer, moderator, challenger, or commentator. But these roles should be chosen in service in a learning goals, objectives, and in support of the instructional activities. Effective teaching involves progressively refining our courses based on reflection and feedback. Teaching requires adapting. Teaching involves making changes. It may also be necessary to seek additional feedback with help from the University Teaching Center.